The U.S. State Department says that Iran spent $16 billion to destabilize the Middle East since 2012. Now, the report says that Iran pumped billions of dollars into propping up Syria's Bashar al-Assad and Iranian-backed terrorist groups around the region. The list of terrorist groups receiving funding include Hamas, Hezbollah, and Islamic Jihad. The report also alleges that Iran is violating international restrictions by providing ballistic missiles to the Houthis. For more on this, let's bring in Ryan Mauro. He is a national security analyst at the Clarion Project. Ryan, thanks for being with us. And Ryan, the U.S. State Department...
Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you, Ryan. The U.S. State Department confirming that there is no country in the world that sponsors and supports terrorism more than Iran. According to this report, Gaza Strip-based Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists group, they have received upward of $100 million from Iran recently. So, assuming this information gets to them, how do you think this kind of financial support to terrorist proxies goes over with the Iranian people?
Oh, they absolutely hate it, and they'll tell you that. There have been brave public demonstrations within Iran where they have condemned the terrorist groups that Iran funds. Every dollar that goes to terrorism is a dollar that could go to the Iranian people, and they know that they work hard and deserve it. So there is a big backlash. It's great for us to publicize these types of numbers. I think the real number is probably higher, but people also need to understand the power of that number. Because they may compare it to something like the U.S. military budget and say, well, it's not much. Consider this. I remember talking to U.S. troops in Iraq years ago, and they were saying you could get a grenade on the black market for about $6. So when you're talking about millions of dollars going to terrorists, in addition to whatever revenue sources they have on their own or from other sponsors, you're talking about a dramatic impact on the region and the world.
Terrifying stuff, and it's also cyber attacks that Iran is funding. And Ryan, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo encouraged other nations and businesses across the world to examine this report, to look at the data, and then to join the U.S. In addressing this. But it seems to me, Ryan, that these calls for cooperation are going to be falling on deaf ears. Why do you think that the data showing Iran's terror financing just gets dismissed by those same countries that are calling for a more secure and a more stable Middle East?
It's a mixture between complacency. You have some people, particularly in Europe, that hear those numbers and they say, well, I don't feel like my life is threatened. I have bigger issues to worry about on a daily basis. And so that type of information just isn't really considered. They hear it and then they forget about it. So there's that overall cultural problem that the entirety of the West is having with complacency. But also, more selfishly, when you compare those types of numbers, they are small compared to the type of money that the European businesses and the politicians that they fund are going to be getting. And that's where a lot of selfish people are going to be focused, especially those that already have a preconceived anti-American bent to their psychology, where they view Iran as being bullied by the United States.
Now, Ryan, Iran is reportedly summoning the German ambassador to Tehran over Germany deciding to hand over an Iranian diplomat wanted in Belgium on suspicion that he was part of that failed plot to bomb an Iranian opposition rally near Paris in June of this year. So, Ryan, now that Europeans see that Iran is financing terrorism on their soil, do you think that that could impact their relations with Tehran?
For a lot of government officials, it might, but they also are going to say, well, it was a relatively small attack. They were targeting enemies of the regime, and it takes two to tango, and so that's something that we just shouldn't be a part of. I hate to say it, but there is going to be this type of backlash where there's going to be some that say, well, the Iranian regime is going after the Iranian opposition. Well, I'm not part of the Iranian opposition, so this isn't a big deal to me. I'd rather try to get along with the Iranian regime. And you know what? Maybe we shouldn't be meddling in other countries' internal affairs anyway. There's a strong political current that thinks like that.
Yeah, certainly is. Ryan, thank you so much. As always, good to have you, Ryan Mauro.